Hey everybody, it's Joey Fight from thephysicaleducator.com. Thanks so much for tuning into the Phys Ed Show podcast. In today's episode, I got my good friend and mentor, Andy Vasily, on the show, and we're going to be talking all about student autonomy in physical education. You are not going to want to miss out on this one, so let's dive right in. Hi everybody, my name is Joey Fight. I'm the founder of thephysicaleducator.com and the host of the Phys Ed Show podcast. Welcome to this very first live kind of recording that we're doing here. We're trying out the audio, and I'm so excited because today I have an incredible guest who's here to talk to us about how we can be supporting our students' autonomy in physical education. So I feel silly kind of introducing him just because I feel like everybody already knows Andy, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce him anyways. Andy Vasily is the host of the Run Your Life podcast. He is a celebrated instructional coach. He is an incredible physical educator, and he's also a good friend and mentor of mine who has influenced my teaching for nearly a decade now. Actually, I think it might even be more than a decade, Andy. I first connected with Andy through the magic of the internet years ago when I stumbled on his incredible blog, PYPPE with Andy. And I was just blown away at the way that Andy was keeping his students at the center of their learning experience and helping them visualize their transformation through their experiences in physical education and providing them with ample opportunity to exercise their voice and engage in their own decision-making and choice in physical education. So today what we're going to be doing is I want to talk to Andy about how he became that teacher and what happens when you start empowering your students by providing them with opportunities for voice and choice in PE and supporting that autonomy, and how that can lead to more effective and meaningful physical education experiences. So Andy, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to do this, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to kind of be my guinea pig here for this first video format.
I love it, Joey, and you can hear my dog barking in the background, unfortunately, but he'll stop soon. When you're describing me, I'm only thinking about kind of my early days being inspired by you and your work and reaching out to you. I was in China at the time. It must have been 2013, maybe, around that. And I remember really following your work and then reaching out to you. I email, and then we corresponded back and forth, and then suddenly I'm sitting on a bar stool in Montreal with you for 10 straight hours the first time we met face to face. I flew from Toronto
I think that was a record.
Yeah, I flew from Toronto to Montreal. I came back from China for Christmas, and it was a tough Christmas because my brother had passed away, and that's why we came back. And I thought, I'm still going to see you. And I stayed at your house, so you had to tell your girlfriend, now wife, Jess at the time, this guy's coming to stay at our house. But, when you...
My internet friend.
Yeah, but when you describe, me, I just throw it right back at, like, you influenced me in so many ways through your work, and then together we just formed this friendship that, challenging one another and learning from one another. And I have always appreciated my deep connection with you and your work. And, I have a quote that I want to share before getting into this episode, and it's from Khalil Gibran. And the quote is this: "When you are born, your work is placed in your heart." And I think that quote just sums up what I think of you. And the work that you're doing is meant to be. So I just wanted to commend you for that and to thank you for the invitation to come on the podcast.
I so appreciate that, Andy, and I'm just excited to dive in here. And hopefully there's going to be a couple people who are going to watch this or listen to this who are unaware of your work and who don't know you and are about to have their minds blown, just because, like I said, when I first started paying attention to how you're going about your teaching, it completely changed the way I thought about physical education. Today when I do work and I talk about the idea of trying to bring what we know are best practices in education and trying to bring that into a physical education context, at the root of that belief or of that purpose is your work. So I'm just really excited for people to get to dive in a little bit deeper into your journey and into your style of thinking when it comes and your approach to physical education and all of the wealth of experience that you bring to everything that you do. So how about we dive right into it, man? So Andy, I want to start off kind of with the start of your career. We've been friends for so long, and we've talked about like all of the different ways that we've interacted, the time that we spent, the way that we've challenged each other through our meaningful conversations and everything. And I feel like I know you, I know your family, I know a lot of your journey. What I don't know is I don't know like the Andy Vasily like origin story. And what I'm curious is that the way that you go about your teaching now, I don't know that there's any teacher education program that I'm aware of that could have set you up for that kind of style of teaching. So I'm assuming the teacher that you are today is very different than the teacher that you were at the start of your career. And I'm wondering, what were the like early aha moments or those transformative experiences that kind of pushed you towards becoming this teacher who, in everything that they do, elevates student autonomy and supports it in every way that they can?
So when you ask that question, I'm immediately drawn back to my relationship with physical activity and sport. And, in my TED Talk, I described how physical activity changed my life and sport gave me meaning and purpose, especially American football and golf. And these sports drove me to escape from a very dysfunctional family environment. So I was always out the door at every opportunity playing lots of sports. But when I found a love of football, that's what I stuck with. And then football obviously led to me playing 15 years competitively. I played 5 years university. I had a CFL tryout. I taught myself how to throw and punt. I became captain of the football team. I worked my ass off in the weight room as an undersized football player. So for me, being an athlete, fitness and health meant everything. So in my early days, when you talk about pre-service teacher programs, I went to the University of Windsor. It taught me nothing about autonomy and agency. It gave me the bare bones about what teaching is and how to more or less conduct yourself in a classroom. It gave me nothing else. But my journey as a physical educator, it was about being an athlete and being fit and being healthy, and that meant everything. So my early days, having no mentors, it was about teaching toughness and strength and conditioning and hard work in order to be physically strong and vital. It wasn't about mental well-being. It wasn't about emotional well-being. I didn't even understand my own narrative back when I started teaching, and I wasn't able to really understand the impact that physical activity and sport had on my life in a bigger picture. So I knew that I cared deeply about teaching, but to me, I taught the only way that I knew, which was to push my values on the kids, what I think is best based on my experiences. There was no autonomy. There was no choice. There was no voice. There was do as I teach, complete direct instruction. I did teach a lot about resilience and pushing yourself, whole class games, no modifications, until I entered the international teaching world, Hiroshima International School. Inquiry-based teaching and learning, what the hell is that? I had no idea. But then suddenly through professional development, you're starting to read about the early days of inquiry-based teaching. Inquiry-based teaching has been around for decades, but for me, it was the first days of learning about inquiry-based teaching. So it really intrigued me, and it began to get my wheels spinning about what is this about, what's possible. And then my first mentor, my principal, he would attend my classes and he asked me a lot of coaching type questions. So instead of giving me an evaluation or tell me what I could have done better, he might say, what options do they have in this game beyond what you offer? What options might you think about next time? What types of rules can you add to expand their thinking? So suddenly I'm in a different space and I'm like, okay, interesting. Does it have to be played in the traditional way? So he was really provoking my thinking, and it was just like the floodgates opened up. And I've always been like, one of my core values is curiosity and open-mindedness. So I really, being curious, I was like, okay, I can really explore more of what this might look like. So I was able to begin to tinker with how games might be delivered, and try it out, and begin to ask the students, what do you think of that? And I really didn't know it was like reflection at the time. It was just like starting to
Mhm.
ask the kids, do you like this style? Did you like having at least two choices? So that just kind of opened up the floodgates for what was possible, got the wheels spinning, and the wheels didn't haven't stopped spinning since. So,
Apparently.
yeah.
That's interesting because I never it kind of sounds like because you yourself had your autonomy supported through like that coaching model, that was like that switch that all of a sudden is like, hey, there's a different way of going about things than just telling people what to do. Um, and that also goes. I know you do a lot of work like in terms of blogging about leadership and everything. That also goes to show just how important it is as a leader to recognize the role of autonomy, not only in motivation but in excellence and peak performance for educators. Um, so you started teaching internationally in here at Hiroshima, right? Um, and you taught at several international schools ever since then, including Azerbaijan, Cambodia, China. Now you're in Saudi Arabia. Am I missing any?
No, that's it. Yeah. So Japan, Azerbaijan, Cambodia,
Um,
China, now Saudi. Yeah.
so I guess what I want to ask you next is that because you've visited several different schools, I'm assuming that there's been schools that you've gone into where the culture within the physical education program is not one that necessarily emphasizes student autonomy. And if you're coming in after your experience in Hiroshima and you're coming in and all of a sudden you're trying, and I know that the inquiry cycle is baked into the international schools program, but when you're coming in with your approach, what was the reaction you got from students who may have been used to something completely different, and maybe even working with colleagues who were very skill and drill type, or administrators, parents who were very used to like, well, phys ed's supposed to be about doing push-ups and things like that. Like, how did you, I guess what I'm trying to ask is what were the steps that you kind of followed to shift the culture towards one that supports student autonomy?
That's a good question. And, you imagine walking into a school. So this is the International School of Azerbaijan. So I leave Japan after 10 years, and I go to Eastern Europe with Neela and my boys, Eli and Ty at the time, that were 2 and 4. And I walk in and I meet the phys ed department, and they were all Olympians, former Olympians, Soviet bloc Olympians. So there was a sprinter who was a sprinter in the '96 Atlanta Olympics, two handball players, and a high diver, and they were all about skill and drill, like exactly as you imagine, like '60s, '70s PE, waiting in line, perfect execution, focusing solely on technique, really, a very coaching kind of teacher directed approach, drive them hard, like I said, waiting in line. And I'm just like, holy shit. And then I have a teaching partner, and she was a handball player, threw the ball as hard as me. I'm a quarterback. She had a gun on her. But it was very much about skill and drill. And then because we were in the early days of the PYP there, the primary years program, the International Baccalaureate Inquiry-Based Teaching, the school was giving a lot of professional training. So these, my colleagues, wonderful people, they were for being exposed to this for the first time. So it was like kind of a perfect storm. And then that's when I really started kind of running with it. So we were co-teaching. So she would have her class, I would have my class. And then I started to say, hey, let's bring our classes together and let's offer 3 versions of the game. Why don't we try 2 versions? What might be a different version? And then she was open to it. And then she kind of let me lead. And then I began to, that was before PYP PE with Andy. So then I started to create these reflection sheets where I had both versions of the game on paper. And I say, circle the game you played today. 1, 2, 3, how much did you like it? 1, 2, 3, how well do you think you did? So I didn't really understand still the power of reflection, but at least I was getting them to reflect on their choice.
Mm-hmm.
And she was open to it. And then the more that I got going with it, the more ideas just started to flood to me about we can offer this option too, and we can offer that option. And we can break them into 6 groups, and we can have them, instead of rotating clockwise, we can have them just go to any station that they want to explore. So I had, luckily, again, a great administrator that allowed me to explore like this, provided that the kids were active and that the kids were engaged, and that we continued to offer choice. So the thinking in the elementary department started to shift, but the high school was still very much like track and field, basketball, soccer, skill and drill, like no differentiation. But at least in the elementary, we were beginning to explore what's possible. And then when I left that school, um, the teacher, my co-teacher, I know had difficulty continuing on in that way without the next teacher that came in wasn't as inquiry based as I was. So
Right.
it was easy for her to go back to her old ways.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, right? With change is that it's, you get that initial momentum, but then as soon as you start hitting an obstacle again, you kind of just fall back into your defaults. Um, and I think that showcases the power of ongoing professional reflection and professional development, where you never kind of let that steam condense back down, but you try and maintain it over time. Um, so when you started taking this approach and start offering more choice and getting students to reflect, and all of a sudden their autonomy is at the forefront of their learning experience, what changes from your perspective, from all of the work that you've done as an instructional coach, but also as a physical educator, as a speaker, what changes in the learner? What happens to the learner when all of a sudden they recognize that, their voice matters and that they're able to choose kind of their own destiny in their learning? What's observable there?
Mm. A lot of times, it's especially when they're not used to it, it's overwhelmed, because it's like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. So it's like, I think that's where teachers can sometimes, the most well intentioned teachers who want to provide choice, it's not just about choice. I guess they have to kind of explore with, at least offer choice first, but then try to understand the why behind the choice. And then with each choice, try to unpack it. So you go from just choice to under, helping the kids understand what's available at each choice. So it's micro choice within choice. So I think what happens for the students is they think it can just be a free for all. They think that I can just do whatever I want. I have these choices, but there's no purpose behind the choice. It's not just randomness and chaos and run here and try that and then run over there and do that. No, it's carefully thought out. It's logically sequenced, and with each choice there are entry points. I often talk about entry points to learning. So it's like, okay, they may have a basketball station, but then that basketball station is broken down into entry points. So the bare minimum entry point might just be you'd have 2 hands on the ball for the ones that can't dribble with one hand, and all they're doing is just throwing it down and catching it with 2 hands, throwing it down and catching it, throwing it, and then it's like dribbling with 2 hands. And then it's, so you're trying to have some progression or breakdown of choice within each choice. So I think what happens initially is a bit of overwhelm, because they think it's fun, but they don't really understand the why behind the choices. And that's the challenge for the teacher. It's not a free for all. That's a myth. It's not a free for all. You have to carefully structure and scaffold each of those areas to allow them to explore with purpose. And I have a quote here from Guy Claxton, Professor Guy Claxton, who wrote this amazing book right here, The Future of Teaching and the Myths That Hold It Back. And I've had him on my podcast, and he's brilliant. And his, favorite phrase that he uses all the time is exploration before explanation. So that idea, you're letting them explore before having to explain and know, but still they have to understand that within the choice, there are expectations still. It's not a free-for-all. So you have to be very explicit and intentional about offering choices that make sense to the kids and that they can understand in very simple terms what the expectations are with the choice that they have chosen, so to speak.
Do you think I'm really big on learning targets and success criteria. And do you think that being able to share that, or even, I know you've done a lot of work in terms of like unpacking learning targets and co-constructing learning targets with students. Do you think that giving them that like ultimate destination that you're working towards, does that then infuse those choices with that sense of purpose?
Absolutely. It begins with, obviously it begins with the standards, but then it's really unpacking what it looks like, what success looks like, what does it feel like, and I like to use the challenge scale, I call it. So, and I wrote about this in the Meaningful PE. I had a chapter in the Meaningful PE book with the cycling unit. Dr. Tim Fletcher asked me to write this chapter, and I was very grateful for that opportunity. But it's like, yes, you have your learning targets, but then the kids have to understand what challenge means to them. So it's not about picking the easy thing and just running with it. It's like really understanding the concept of challenge. So I use a challenge scale 1 to 10. Let's say 1 is easy peasy lemon squeezy, I say, and 10 is impossible. So go ahead, explore, have some fun. The expectation is you're safe, that you are engaged, and have some fun. But then with each part of the lesson, there are more and more constraints placed on them. So now we're zeroing in on how challenging was that for you at that station. And if it's a 1 or a 2, then you need to level up to a 5, 6, or 7, or even an 8, so that there's some element of frustration there. I want, when they're describing what that was like, I want it to be a little frustrating. I can't, it's not easy for me, but it's not impossible. That zone, Goldilocks zone, where the great stuff happens and then they're sticking to it, and you can see their eager eyes just completely engaged in the task. And that's the idea of flow, and they lose sense of time, and then class is over. What? Already? But it is that idea of, like, you talk about learning targets. So yeah, you have your learning targets that are clear and explicit, and the students have been involved in co-constructing success criteria. But now we're talking challenge, using the language of challenge at all times throughout the year, all times. So
I love that. I remember I did a unit called my jump rope deli, where it was the first time that students were kind of putting together like a performance piece through jump rope. And we talked a lot about, the paper I based it on was on performance confidence in music education. And I know that in your coaching and your leadership within the school, you've worked with a lot of different specialists and different subject areas. But what I found interesting was the idea of not only presenting the different zones, so the different performance zones that students can follow themselves in, but breaking down what each zone can feel like, so that when they start feeling those feelings, they're not like foreign to them. They're not like a surprise and be like, oh, because usually, like, if you're feeling frustrated or you're getting angry or you're struggling with something, you might think something's wrong, and because it's wrong, you might gravitate away from it. Whereas if you're able to front load students with that idea that if you're experiencing these feelings, it's because you're being challenged, and you're able to overcome those challenges by using a variety of like tactics that we had talked about in class, or habits of successful learners. So instead of moving away from it, what happens if you lean into it? And I remember when I was reading that paper, there was I forget what the 4 zones were. I'd have to look back at my resource there, but there was one final zone where it was like the challenge is way outside of your current ability level, and staying there ultimately won't help you progress. It's too far out. So being able to recognize that and tone it down from there. But it does involve like giving yourself an opportunity to grapple with your learning. And I think in a lot of situations where, you know, I've tried to help keep my students in the driver's seat of their own learning, I've had this reaction, this knee jerk reaction, that like as soon as they're having a hard time, I want to step in and like and make it easier for them, or do something. Whereas really the best thing I can do in a lot of those situations is just to give them those like extra 2-3 minutes of just struggling with it, because they might figure it out then, and then the solution will have come from them. And I know that's something that I always struggled with, because like I just had a hard time seeing kids struggling, and I was like, I want to help you out. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to be helping out. But thinking like longer term.
So what you're talking about, sorry to interrupt you, but what you're talking about is self-adjusting learners. So creating self-adjusting learners so that you don't have to step in, right? So you see that they've chosen something too difficult, but you have created a culture and an environment of learning in your classroom or in the gym, wherever it is, in the music room, the art room. You have created an environment where they know it's too hard. You have used the challenge scale so much that they're very familiar with the numbers, and that they know that it's too hard for them, so they self-adjust. They come to you and say, Mr. Joey, this is, I'm struggling with this. It's too hard for me. I'm going to choose this instead. That is a huge win, you know? And I'm still doing some coaching this year, and I was just coaching the Islamic team. And the Islamic team was, we're looking at how to create this idea with reading the Quran. They have a lot of Muslim students. So I'm saying, well, first of all, make the options of the Quran verses visible on posters. Allow them an entry point to set goals, like they'll learn the first 5 verses, whatever it is, and then get them to self-assess. And over time, we did it all last year. Now what they're finding is when they ask the kids to honestly self-assess themselves, it's a much closer to what the teacher would say that where they are at. And they have the ability to self-adjust so that they pick the right verses to study. So the same goes with music, art, PE. You want to create self-adjusting learners, you know, and refrain, as you say, from jumping in.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately, when we think of like the longer term purpose of what it is that we're doing in terms of, you know, helping our students find that place where they have the motivation, they have the skills, knowledge, understandings, everything they need to be able to continue to enrich in their life with physical activity and adventure, whatever it may be. A big part of being able to do that when you're out of school and you don't no longer have this like structured format of having like a mentor or teacher they're working with you, is that self-awareness piece. And I think that for a lot of people, that might be something that's been missing out on their journeys in terms of like the self-awareness. Because I think it's funny, the other day I was at the skate park here. I took the boys to the skate park. Like the boys, like my youngest gets up like at 5 a.m. still. So we were at the skate park at like 6:45 a.m. But we got there and there were 2 adults there skateboarding, full gear, everything. And I was just watching them skateboard, and I was like, these people look like they're pretty new to this, but like, what 40-year-old's going to start like skateboarding in their 40s? And sure enough, I was just on, I was like, hey, do you guys come here often? Like, and I was like, no, we just started skateboarding 2 weeks ago. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, and then the husband was like, yeah, like I need to lose some weight and I hate going to the gym. And I always thought skateboarding was cool. So I figured I tried it. And then his wife was like, and I just got sick of like sitting on the bleachers watching him skate. So I decided to get into it too. And here they are, they're skateboarding in their 40s. And I was just like blown away because I was like, man, I get a paper cut and it takes me like 8 months to heal from it now. Like it used to be, I could break my leg and I'd be back on the court the next day. But you know, for them to have that like awareness of self of being like, yeah, this is something that's scary, but I'm pretty sure I'll be able to navigate it. Like that, like just think of like what a rich experience that then is, that they get to spend their weekend morning skateboarding together, like in an empty park and having fun. So I just thought that was incredible. So I definitely think like it's not so much about the things that you like, but also the things that you're capable of and the way that you're able to overcome obstacles that may present themselves to you. And I think those are like those moments that we're able to create for students, will ultimately just wind up to, again, just enriching their lives. And I always like, I remember once on one of your podcasts you were talking about Kretschmar's work and he said like giving them the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes
Yeah,
down
because
to.
we can just, as Scott said, Kretschmar said, um, your job is to take them by the hand. I'll never forget this. I got emotional as you were saying it, but your job is to take them by the hand and lead them to the kingdom doors and open the doors up to show them what's possible. Right? And I have never forgotten that. That's such a powerful and profound statement.
It is. Okay, so you kind of touched on this earlier when you were talking about working with your co-teacher in Azerbaijan. A lot of teachers who know how powerful student autonomy can be and the impact it can have on learning, on motivation, on self-confidence, all those things, they go and they try it and they wind up facing obstacles, and kind of similar to what you were saying before, as soon as things kind of get tough, they like fall back to their defaults. So in your experience, both as a teacher and as an instructional coach, what are some of the common obstacles that teachers may face, and what would you suggest teachers try when they're about ready to kind of like give up and go back to default?
I think the one myth is that it's about handing over control. And I think it's a complete myth. I think it's handing ownership over, because the teacher is still in control of the learning environment. They need to be, they're the professional, you know? And I think one of the things is, don't think you're giving up control, because you're not giving up control. You're handing ownership over to the learning. You're facilitating learning. So that's the first thing. And it's like, be okay with trying out different aspects of this. I see so much on social media, and it drives me crazy, and I have to bite my tongue, and I feel so judgmental. When I see a post, and then I feel a bit triggered, and I think I want to ask a question, and then I ask a question, and then I feel like I'm being judgmental. But really, I'm challenging teachers to think about, what is it that they have to let go of within themselves in order to just hand over a little bit of ownership to the kids. What would it look like? What might it look like? Teaching these same units year to year in the exact same way implies that there is no growth. You're not evolving. It's easy. It's comfortable. You're a star. You know it. You know how you've done it. The kids love you. I get it. But how are you actually going to challenge yourself to continue to grow and evolve? So I think the obstacle is within. What do you have to let go of within? When you look at the concept, if you want to call it giving over, handing over control or ownership, however you want to phrase it, doesn't matter. But what is the fear about that you have? Is it an internal pressure you're putting on yourself to be in control, or is it an external pressure that you feel, or is it a combination? What is your relationship with control? How far back does the feeling of needing to be in control go in your life? It's internal work. And I say this all the time. It's not just about opening up a bloody textbook, a teacher book, or the latest paper or whatever it is, and just reading it and sucking in the knowledge, and then thinking about how it might apply. You got to do some deep exploration of yourself and your relationship with control, and to understand what fears there are about handing over control, and or ownership, however you want to put it. But I think the obstacle is within. It's really asking yourself these questions, like, the obstacle is, as Ryan Holiday says, the
I
obstacle
was
is
just
the
gonna
way.
say,
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of which, I was gonna say, did you ever read Ego is the Enemy?
Yeah, and I'm just on right now. Uh, the key to
On
what is it? The key to silence?
Discipline,
No, the
or there's Courage is Calling.
courage is calling.
He's got a new
I
one.
have, and then stillness.
Oh, Stillness is the
It's
Key.
stillness is the key. Yeah. So the idea is it's the internal work, and you have to really reflect on that. So I believe that the person, the teacher, is the biggest obstacle. The way they've taught is the biggest obstacle. You know, yes, it can be your facilities, it can be the students can be challenging, it can be your lack of resources, but at the end of the day, we're incredibly creative. Teachers are incredibly creative. So I think the obstacle resides within, and really understanding what is it about yourself that is not allowing you to take the chance and risk needed to explore what's possible in your practice.
Um, I wanted to, you know, one thing I just wanted to say in regard to doing that internal work. In my own like coaching philosophy, I talk a lot about like the transformation towards becoming a full stack physical educator, which is, broken down into three stacks in terms of your teaching, passion, and the bottom one, the most important one, is being able to prioritize your health. I think that in order to be able to give yourself the opportunity to engage in the reflection required to do that internal work, you have to look at how your day is designed, or your life is currently designed, and see, okay, where can I set up boundaries that are going to free up the headspace I need to continuously engage in this like growth oriented reflection and work. I think that without that, it's so easy. We were talking about Jim Knight before we started recording, and I was reading the instructional coaching, the definitive guide to instructional coaching, and he shared a stat in there saying that there was a survey amongst professionals in North America, and of all the different categories of professionals, teachers were the most likely to be engaged at work, but they were also the most likely to report that at work their voice doesn't matter. And I think that's like just education in general is kind of designed to strip teachers of a lot of opportunities to exercise their own autonomy. And I think that's where it's important when we're setting boundaries. We think that what we're doing is we're setting these boundaries to protect that autonomy so that we're able to continue to grow and live our lives in the ways that are best aligned to what we envision for ourselves and how we want to grow and what's important to us. It's just a little caveat there that I wanted to add to that.
And that's rooted in science
And
too, Joey. That's rooted in science, and research around what it means to be a lifelong learner, and the ability to make yourself vulnerable, and the ability to put yourself out there, and the ability to never be stagnant. You feel this internal pressure, this nudge to keep moving forward. And the best teachers continue to move forward and challenge themselves in that way. So, it's rooted in the science behind high performance as well.
mm, yeah, I've talked about before, and I know you and I have talked about it off camera too. Just the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. For me, that was like a big eye opener in terms of you only have a limited amount of time here. How are you going to set up your life in a way that's going to honor the little amount of time that you have so that you can truly enjoy your life? And moving away from this idea of, I have to balance work and life. It's all just your life. It's the only time that you get. Life is how you experience time. So being able to keep yourself in the driver's seat there puts you in a position where you can feel fulfilled, you can feel like you have a strong sense of purpose, and a lot of that taps into Stephen Kotler's work, who you turned me into with the Art of Impossible. That's been really impactful to me.
Can I just add one thing, Joey?
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a story that I heard, if you don't mind me sharing it, that connects with what you just said about 4,000 weeks in Oliver's work. And I heard Denzel, I shared this on a podcast recently, but I heard Denzel Washington. I'm listening to a lot of talks and recently I'm taking notes in my journal and stuff. And Denzel Washington is giving a commencement speech, and he talks about being on your deathbed. It's a bit morbid, but he talks about being on your deathbed and you're surrounded by the ghosts of unfulfilled potential. And they're angry and they're hurt and they're sad and they're like, you never acted on our ideas. You never acted on the talents we gave you. And now we have to go to the grave together. And Denzel asks the audience, how many ghosts of unfulfilled potential will be surrounding you when your time comes? And I'm like, holy shit. It's like,
it's very uncomfortable.
It is, but it aligns with Oliver's work, which is you don't have a lot of time. Be precise. You're not going to accomplish everything that you think you can set out to accomplish. So be precise and intentional and prioritize what's most important in your life. So if you are a teacher, it's prioritizing the kids in front of you. It's not, it's not prioritizing anything else. It's prioritizing the kids in front of you, and remember what it's like to be a kid who is in awe of the world and in awe of learning, and the look on a kid's face when they do something that they never thought they could achieve. But then, as Ken Robinson says, we suck it out of them, So it's just a reminder that our time is limited as teachers. These kids, I look back on my career, and I have like students now in their 40s, late 30s and 40s, and it's like I had a limited time with them. So how am I going to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered as a hero or anything like that. I want to be remembered as somebody that allowed them to achieve the unknown, and to really excel and to find a love of learning. So it just connects to what you said about Oliver's work.
Yeah, that even getting back to that whole ego, it's a lot of like, you need to be willing to push your ego aside for that. The quote that's always resonated with me is a society grows great when old men plant seeds of trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. And talking about like not trying to be remembered as a hero, but as somebody who truly like empowered. And I think oftentimes the most impactful people in your life end up being the people who are probably the most like self-effacing in a lot of ways, because they never made it about them. They made it about you. And I think that's what was so empowering about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say a teacher is listening to this podcast and you're like, you know what? I'm going for it. I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna really get reflective on my teaching. I'm gonna look at how I'm structuring my lessons, how I'm structuring my program. I'm gonna survey my students to see how they feel in terms of how much their voice matters in class, how much choice and opportunity I'm providing them, and I want to change the way I'm teaching to start empowering them through that autonomy and by celebrating their voice and increasing the amount of choice they have experience to. If I'm a teacher, I'm in that position, and I start making this change, what are the look-fors that I should be mindful of that are going to serve as like indicators that I'm on the right path? So what changes in student behavior or beliefs should I keep on my radar so that I know that like, okay, like what I'm doing right now is it's starting to have an impact. It's working.
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you send me some questions ahead of time just to think about, and I'm back teaching for the first. I've been teaching the last few years. I've been an instructional coach. I've done a lot of consulting. I've run workshops, but I haven't been back in the classroom full time until this year. And although I'm still doing some coaching, it's like it was an eye opener. And I felt rusty as shit at the start of the year, even though I've been teaching. And then suddenly I felt it was daunting to me. It was like I got to go back, not go back in a negative way, but I like you got to get into a headspace
Yeah.
of being like, being on the administrative team. Like you're out of the trenches, and it's easy to talk a big game, and it's easy to talk about strategic vision and me as an instructional coach and all the work that I've done. And it's easy for me to talk about what great teaching might look like and feel like. But now I'm with these kids all the time. So I think for me, the way I've looked at this year is I've got to revisit student voice in a way that I I know that they know that I am acting on their voice, right? So the first thing to look for is if you begin to, first of all, I would say if this is foreign to you and you haven't really taken this approach about autonomy and agency and student voice, is every lesson offer three choices. Just start with three choices, and just give them a choice over their learning, and help them understand why you're doing that, and what you're hoping to achieve. I haven't done this, and this is what I say if I do something new with my students. I say I haven't done this yet. This is new for me, so I really need your feedback. And I promise you that I will listen to you. And if this doesn't work, we will not do it again, kind of thing. But share your honest thinking with the kids, first of all, what you're thinking. You don't have to be the knowledge authority who knows everything. Be a learner alongside them. But that idea that the look fors would be that obviously students are really engaged when you look at all of your learners, and the diverse needs of your learners. You can stand back. You don't have to be the sage on the stage. You've created an environment that you can stand back and observe. And when you're observing, the look fors would be engagement. You actually see them engaged. They're not screwing around in the corner and hiding behind the curtain, and they're not looking for every excuse to go to the toilet or go get water. They are engaged. And then simply the look fors at the end of class do that quick 1 minute exit ticket. And it might be, okay, how was class today? Like, how much did you honestly, in your heart, how much did you enjoy today's physical education experience, people? And a thumbs up would be, I really enjoyed it. Sideways thumb would be, so-so. And thumbs down would be, I did not like it. So I can say in my own case, out of a class of 20, 22 students, 23 students, I'll get 3 or 4 kids with thumbs down. And then I say, thank you for being honest. What's one thing I can do next time to move you to a sideways thumb? Do this, do that, and give us more water breaks, whatever. And you don't have to ask me. You can get water whenever you want. But the point is that the look fors would be total engagement. The look fors would be that they understand the why behind the choice, what you're trying to achieve. And I think the look fors would be that they know that you care about what they think, that you are checking in with them, and you are taking action on it, and they are able to, if you have an outside person come in and ask them about their learning, they're able to communicate that, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are the big things for me, is just like offer 3 choices. Just start with 3 choices, and then move from there. But absolutely include the students in reflecting on those experiences and take action on
it. I love that. That's such a simple way of surveying students and getting feedback from them at the end of the lesson, and then being able to act on that. And I know it can be hard, because years ago when I told you I want to start doing end of the year surveys with my grade 6 students on what they thought of my teaching over the years, and the kind of teacher I am. And I told them flat out, I was like, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm still learning and I want to grow. So I appreciate any praise that you're giving me, but what I really care about is what you can tell me I can do better, because nobody knows my teaching better than you. You're the ones that experience it. And I think like it was like every question, like you shared those questions with me. I think every question was like on a 4-point scale, and it was like not at all, sometimes, most of the time, always. And I'll just always remember that one kid being like, Joey, where it says I enjoy Joey's teaching, if I'm torn between a not at all and sometimes, and this is like supposed to be an anonymous survey, he's like, if I'm torn between a not at all and sometimes, what should I put down? And I was like, you know what, man, just give me the not at all, and let me know why. But you know what? Like as much as I like to think, maybe that student's response was just like an outlier, and it could just get erased on the bell curve, whatever. But knowing that, hearing the hard things, oftentimes when those hard things like hit you, it's because deep down there's some truth to it. And I think like being able to hear it just brings it to light, being like, this thing that I was afraid of existing actually does exist. It's not widespread. But it is there to a degree. And it's a great opportunity for me to have like a huge impact in that one area. And most importantly, show my students that when I say I want to hear your voices, I actually really want to hear their voices. I really want to use what they're able to tell me to improve not only their experiences, improve my teaching, and even more importantly, improve our time together. Because like when you have those lessons where all those students are engaged and students are able to talk, like share like the sense of purpose that they have with anybody who walks in, man, those lessons, those are straight up magic. Like those are the lessons you live for as a teacher. So to figure out that there's actual dials that you can be turning to increase the likelihood of those lessons happening on a regular basis, even though they might be like hard and scary to turn, you got to figure out what they are,
Yeah.
so that you're able to like create that kind of magic.
Yeah,
So
Joey, can I just in going? I just want to share one more thing, because as you're describing that, I love the metaphor of turning the dials and tinkering, and this might seem like completely off topic, but it's not. It's completely connected. And I asked to share the screen before, but I want to show for the people that might watch this on video or are listening to this that want to come back. I want to show something completely new that I did, and it is like I'm in control, but it's activating student voice in the assessment process. So it may give some listeners, just as we segue to a close, it may give some listeners something tangible to grab onto. So I'm going to share my screen now, okay?
Absolutely. And while you do that, I just want to say, if you are listening to the show as a podcast, like an audio podcast, be sure to check out the physical.com's blog. I'll have the episode up as a blog post, and I'll embed the video there as well. And I'll let you know when we kind of jump to this section, so you can go in and you can check out these visuals that Andy's going to be sharing with
Great.
us.
So Joey, can you see the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Okay, just so you can see the examples. So I'm gonna expand, and it's loading right now. And why I want to share this is new to me. This is something new that I've tried this year. So Joey, just tell me if you can.
And I love this.
Can you see it? Choose an order. This was actually from my learning conversation today. So at my school, we have professional inquiries. I've been a coach of teachers and taking teachers through their own professional inquiries for 7 years. And now I'm on the teacher end with my own professional inquiry. And as a result of my learning conversation today with the principal of the school, I've actually changed it a little bit, but my professional inquiry is, how can I create assessment-capable learners in order to make my teaching and student learning more meaningful? So I'll explain more what assessment-capable learners means in a minute, but if we look at this, so there's no particular order here, but you see there's 4 pictures on top, and then there's 4 pictures below. I want you to look at the second picture on the bottom row, okay? The second picture. The unit, we're doing a teamwork adventure challenge unit, and the unit began with the standard of being responsible members of a team. So the driving question was, what are ways that we can show responsibility when working on teams? So again, Joey, you've known me for years. I begin every learning experience with a driving question, whether it be the provocation at the start of the unit, but every lesson there's a driving question in which I want the students to think about. So any teachers listening to this, that right there is something that you can ensure that you do, is start every learning experience with a driving question. So this was an exit ticket at the end of the learning experience. So this took 3 to 5 minutes because it was the start of the unit. And the exit ticket usually doesn't take this long, but the kids as an exit just wrote down one way that they could show responsibility when working on teams. So the first lesson of the week, all the kids unpacked this question. So I had all of these sticky notes. So at the end of the day, I took all these sticky notes down. Next day, the first lesson for the other kids in the school, they put their sticky notes up, and then the other classes, they all added to it. So then I categorized with colleagues in my department, we categorized the student responses into themes. So then we had 8 themes that really came alive. So then I took clip art images of the 8 themes. For example, we can listen better, or we can stay focused, or we can help each other, whatever it was. I had clip art images. I don't have a picture of that here, but the next step was to put the clip art images up on the whiteboard. So there was 8 clip art images with the driving questions still up there. The second lesson of the week, I'm lucky I have 2 lessons, but if you don't have 2 lessons, it could just be the following week's lesson. The kids see the 8 themes that have already been unpacked, and then you say, that as a teacher, I say, okay, those are the 8. I don't want to hear any of these 8 ideas. I want you to create some new ideas. Turn and talk to the person beside you. What idea is not up there? What do you want to share? So after iteration 2.0 of this, the students came up with 4 more themes. So now if we look at the top row, third picture from the right, we now had 12 ideas. So I took those 12 ideas and I created the poster, 12 ways that I can show responsibility. So now I had that poster. Now if we look at the bottom left picture, okay, the very bottom left, I printed off 15 of these posters and I put them around the gym. And as the kids were lined up to begin class in PE, I came from the classroom. I said, okay, I want you to think about your day so far in your other classes, your homeroom class. When you go in the gym, you're going to do a walk and talk. You're going to look at the poster and you're going to talk to a friend about a way or ways that you've shown responsibility so far today. That took 3 to 5 minutes. And then we were engaged in physical activity the rest of the class. And then at the end of the activity, we went back to what ways did you show responsibility when working together? So then the kids turned and talked for a couple minutes and they shared one way that they worked together well with their peers. That led to me sharing the 12 ways that I can show responsibility poster with the classroom teachers. Then the classroom teachers, as part of morning circle, said, this is what you have unpacked with Mr. Andy in PE. So as a class in this room, what are 2 to 3 ways we really want to focus on? So let's say I have 4 grade 2 classes for PE, 4 different classrooms. Then each class, the teacher would send me, the class would vote on the 3 ways that they want to focus on showing responsibility. So now if we look at the top 2 pictures on the left, the top one on the left,
which just have like 3 options,
yes,
and have all these green stickers
on
it.
So that's Miss.
So it's been narrowed down.
Yes, that's Miss Meanell's class. So the 12 are important. The 12 ways are still up in her classroom, but her class has decided that those 3 ways, which is I'm always going to try my best, I'm always going to help others, and I'm always going to, can't see the top one, it's either take care of the equipment, I think it's take care of the equipment or materials.
Okay.
So now I created a poster of 3 specific to Miss Meanell's class. Now, another teacher, let's say Miss Tan's class, her kids will come up with 3 different ways possibly. So I create a class-specific poster for that class. Still grade 2, but it's a different
Yeah.
different poster. And then
Different, but it's also a different cohort, different group of kids. Like
yes,
there's like each group's going to have their own needs, and this is a great way of getting the group itself to identify those needs.
exactly. So now it's class context and class specific. So I share the poster with the classroom teacher, who then refers to it constantly. So the classroom teacher is also expecting that they're going to demonstrate those 3 ways to show responsibility. I have some classrooms that only pick 2, but I said 2 or 3. So now when they come to PE, I take the class-specific poster. So in this case, top left, Miss Me Now's poster. And I say, okay, today we're going to get right to it. You're going to have some team challenges. At the end of this class, you're going to get a sticky dot with your name on it. So I write their names on sticky dots ahead of time. And as now, if you look at the top right, you can see I've given them their sticky dot with their name on it. So as they're leaving the gym, it's under 60 seconds. They just put their sticky dot with their name on the one way they showed responsibility the most. And you get kids that say, oh, what if I showed all 3? I want you focused only on one. So now my timely feedback is I give them a thumbs up if I agree. I give them a sideways thumbs. I'll let them put it on. But if I don't feel that they demonstrated trying their best, for example, and they want to put it on there, I don't let them put it on it. And I say, you sat out of this game 3 different times. So I want you to...
There's an accountability
level.
Yeah,
so I want you to think about it. And I'm absolutely going to give you a chance to put your sticky dot on trying your best after next lesson. So then they don't get to put the sticky dot on. So that's my timely feedback. So when they leave, I have the poster, I get a photo of it, I send it to the classroom teacher. Okay? So it's a way that there is autonomy here. This is autonomy in action with constraints, though.
Yeah.
We've unpacked responsibility. The class has had autonomy over the 3 they've chosen. Now it's given me 3 laser sharp things to focus on in my teaching and in every task. This is what I'm looking for. And I literally pretend I'm looking at them with binoculars at the beginning of class saying, this is what I'm watching for. So I wanted to share that as a real tangible real example of what it looks like in action. So, but it connects to our whole episode about autonomy. So it's not just choice over learning experience, it's choice over success criteria, self-assessment, and then I can use those posters for reporting because we simply have to do strength statements and next step statements. So, and then each class would be a different sticky dot, so it might be light green for one, then the next class, they self-assess again using red. So I know the different color means different lesson. So that's what I wanted to share.
You know what I love about that? And I think this is when going back to the talk about control earlier and ego and student autonomy throughout this episode, it's a partnership. The learning experience is a partnership, and in real authentic partnerships, all parties continue to recognize the autonomy of the other party. And I think that's where you find that sweet spot where the students, through your words, but also through your actions, through your priorities, they know that you really care about them being central to this experience, and that you want to design this experience to meet their needs and have them communicate those needs, or reflect and identify those needs first and then communicate them. So
it's awesome. It's transdisciplinary because it also applies. So we write it in a non-discipline specific way. So it applies to their life outside PE as well. So I try to keep the language very transdisciplinary rather than disciplinary, right?
And I think that's the most powerful learning opportunities are the ones where transfer is baked right in from the start.
Yeah.
And being able to help students practice these skills and work towards these goals in as many different contexts as possible is just going to deepen their learning, and is is something that you can actually create when you put autonomy at the forefront of your teaching.
Absolutely.
Andy, I think that's awesome. I saw you tweet about that. I saw your Twitter thread, and I was like, this is genius.
I love it.
Just another example. And like I like what you said, is like, it doesn't take a ton of time, but it's such a high leverage practice that even investing like that small amount of time is going to yield like huge results and have a huge impact. So,
but it's new. It's new. I want to emphasize it's new. I've never done it before, so I was uncomfortable with it, but I was like, this is cool. I like it. I'm fired up, and so yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, I love how you like how you had those layers too. Like, obviously you've taken what could have been like this really big long task and broke it down into smaller steps that are more manageable, and oftentimes, especially when you're working with younger students, that are going to give them an opportunity to really wrap their heads around, as you're only presenting like one simple step at a time. That's going to one simple step. But there's I wish you can meet her. Megan Webster is an instructional coach in Montreal that I had opportunity to work with a bit out there, and she always talked about like she talked about it, like when she's talking about learning targets or tasks, it'd be like, you got to make it juicy. Like, it's simple, but there's a lot packed in there. And I like that those steps like were simple, one step at a time, but there was a lot of reflection, a lot of autonomy, a lot of voice, a lot of choice. Everything was really baked into it. So I think that's a great example. And it's just, again, proof that like, it doesn't have to be students lying down on the floor of your gym for 3/4 of your class filling out a paper. It can be as simple as like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a little sticky tack button, or whatever you decide to roll with, just to show them that like at all times you're the captain of your ship here. Hey Andy, we're almost out of time here, but I want to make sure before we sign off that if people want to continue learning from you, and want to see future examples of the work that you're doing, or find past examples of the work that you've done, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Thanks, Joey. It would be my podcast for sure, Run Your Life podcast. I have a blog, Andy Vasily, PYPPE with Andy, got hijacked by somebody, and it's crazy. That's a whole different episode, but anyways, I lost that.
I know all about that
domain, and so then I was able to get my content still, and I transferred it over to andyvasily.com. So ANDYVASILY.com. And then I have my aligned leader blog on that, and I'm pretty excited because I'm flipping my 75 blog posts of my aligned leader blog into short 5 to 10 minute episodes, just to kind of challenge people's thinking.
Yeah, I saw you mention that.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, you could go to my blog or the podcast. On Twitter, I'm at Andy Vasily, LinkedIn at Andy Vasily as well. I'm on Instagram, but I don't really use it that much. So that's where people can find me and my work.
Awesome. Well, if this is your first time hearing from Andy, I can honestly say that I would not be the teacher that I am today if it wasn't for his influence, his mentorship, his friendship, including that 10-hour barstool sit down in Montreal, where I feel like a lot of our best ideas have stemmed from.
Yes, absolutely.
And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show here. I know that people are going to get a tremendous amount of value out of this, and I really appreciate it. And just thanks for your commitment to constantly challenging us and raising the bar for phys ed, and for just being so willing to share your wealth of expertise and knowledge with all of us. I love you, brother. I really appreciate it, and I hope that a bunch of other people get to discover just how magical your work truly is.
I appreciate it, Joey. Thank you so much.
Everyone, if you're tuning in here, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning into the Phys Ed Show podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, if you want to do a couple things to help me out here, that'd be great. First of all, leaving a rating on the podcast store would be a great place to start. Also, the best thing you can do is to share this out with any colleagues that you think could benefit from it. It goes a long way in helping people discover the show. I'm committed to doing the show once a week, so every Thursday you can expect a new episode. I'm really excited for this one to go out, and I'm looking forward to a bunch of other podcasts and guests that I have lined up in the future. Hopefully, just putting out content that's going to help you continue to expand your thinking when it comes to physical education, to continue to prioritize your health and well-being, and most importantly, just keep that fire in your belly burning so that you can attack your teaching with purpose and passion. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next Thursday. Happy teaching, everyone.